Hi there, empaths. Welcome back to my channel and back to Journey Through the Tarot. This week we're talking about our week with the Ten of Wands. A lot happened this week, and we're introducing the history, symbolism, and divination of the Page of Wands. This journey is inspired by Alice B. Grist's book, Dirty and Divine, A Transformative Journey Through Tarot. She spent a day with each card. We're doing a week. And most of the information is from my tarot teacher, one of my tarot teachers, Robert M. Place, the Tarot History, Symbolism, and Divination. And we're using the Waite-Smith Symbolism from the Rider Tarot deck. So, it was a long week. It was a lot happened, a lot surfacing, right? I keep hearing like a cat meowing outside or something. So a lot of things happened. It's so hard to unpack. Time is moving so quickly, or a lot's happening in a small amount of time. Time's running together. It was a heavy week emotionally. I mean, if you had to describe the week in a card, it was probably this. I found that we had the full moon in Sagittarius, and I am Sagittarius. A lot of releasing. You know, sometimes with the moon cycle, what will happen is we'll have the new moon, right, with the intention, and then it will accumulate until we get to the full moon and it will be fully actualized, right, or manifested, whatever our intention was. And that's how you can use the moon's energy, right, the lunar cycle, and then release what's not working, right, and start again, really refining the process. So full moons tend to be about release, and we also had a lunar eclipse, and there was a portal. The portal that opened for the lunar eclipse was about what we're holding for other people. So something interesting that came up was I felt like a heavier feeling throughout the week, right? As I sort of grappled with all the new information, all of the interviews I was watching, all the speeches, learning new information and asking questions, right? In safe spaces with friends who understood things I didn't understand, and making mistakes, and you know, I think when you genuinely care, it's really hard. You don't want to misstep. You don't want to create, you know, it's like do no harm. But I also think caring to that extent and having that empathy is what can make for people involved in great social change, right? So we have to own our personal power here. Last week I talked about my friend who he's part of the Black community as well as the LGBTQIA plus community. He's also part of the Broadway community, and I was tempted to reach out to him and ask how to be a better ally. What can I do? And I had a notebook and a pen, right? And I pulled that back. I reeled that one in, and I thought better of doing that. It was like, that's not respectful. It's good intentions, but we've all learned good intentions are meaningless if they, you know, if they hurt somebody. So I didn't want to add to his burden at this time. So I reeled it back. And my podcast co-host and I discussed having him on because he was always in line to be our first guest. He has supported the podcast from the beginning and is very enthusiastic about it, and has helped us out with ideas of what to talk about and things. So as soon as we decided we were ready to take guests, he was always in line to be the first one. And it timed out perfectly that, we had just talked about musical theater conservatory and our individual stories with the arts and everything, my podcast co-host and I. And so it was time to probably have our first guest. And not only that, he's part of the Broadway community. He is a member of the Black community, LGBTQIA plus community. So he's not the spokesperson, but I think that's part of the problem. You can only speak from your own experiences. We can't expect every Black person to speak for the community, right? It's like, I think that's part of the burden, and we don't need to do that. Although listening to individual voices has been really powerful. I've had a lot of epiphanies, a lot of things were illuminated, a lot of things were deconstructed as I heard differing opinions, and I understand and so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I hope you're doing well. Would you like to be on our podcast and think about it and let us know? And he got back to me and said, yes, by the way, I've been watching your videos and you've been helping me. I want to let you know what I learned or what I got from it. Or I don't think he said he learned something, but I was riding high that day because I felt like, wow, if I supported him with a video, that made my entire week. So, because then I felt like I was doing something important, because sometimes it feels like, what can my voice do? And I feel that as a woman, as well as sort of, a recovering from trauma myself. So we had a Zoom call because he was like, I want to see your face while we talk. And so I'm so glad he did. I mean, I was a mess. I did not look good, but we talked, and he let me know everything he was doing. And I don't want to give that away because he'll probably talk about that on the podcast. And just negotiating and speaking out on theaters that created a not good environment, right? And experiences of racism in different theaters and theater companies and things like that. So, and then renegotiating back in rehearsals for his show, and really interesting. So I'm looking forward to having him on the podcast, the Rant podcast. We'll be recording that this weekend. And so that was something interesting that happened. And, I did my best to listen. I am a good listener. He's also my friend. So it's this interesting thing where I wanted to share about myself and my breakthroughs. And I did feel like it was a little much that I should have just listened. I just had a lot going on myself too. And I had been looking for a friend, but I feel like I should have maybe pulled that back a little bit. But like I said, this is messy. This isn't an easy time. This isn't, an easy change. and small steps for progress, right? For long-term change. So we're all doing the best we can. I've been encouraging people to watch 13th, and which is on Netflix, and I Am Not Your Negro, which is on Amazon Prime, particularly white friends and family. And my another thing that my friend posted on his story was a really powerful Instagram TV video of a Black woman talking about, and her name escapes me at the moment, but I've listened to so many different opinions and voices, and I'm really starting to feel empowered by it. She was saying that so many people are congratulating the young girl, Haley, I think her name is, and I only know that because she said it a few times, arguing with her parents about Black people, right? They clearly held racial biases and were expressing racist thoughts. And she was arguing with them. And this incredible woman was saying, I think I added this to my story at urban_empath under the highlight for change with the scales balanced. She was saying, why are you, like, we're all congratulating her, and that's great. She's a young girl and she's standing up for her beliefs. That's great. But why is she talking to her parents about why Black lives or Black people deserve to live, or Black people at all? Why isn't the conversation about why we, why there's this tendency to oppress and what is it in the history that, has created this to begin with? Why aren't we talking about that? And that hit home. There's something there. I haven't quite unpacked all of it. I was saying last week, I was looking at my own oppressor tendencies. There's an inner oppressor. It's a lot to unpack. I felt like with the lunar eclipse, this idea of all the burdens that aren't ours, right? Interesting, right? Breaking our backs with all this burden. Something that came to me this week was interesting how, the victim of something, right? I've gone through my own abuse and situations that I'm healing from. And one of the people responsible for a lot of my trauma came into town this week and reached out and sent a message on Facebook Messenger about, hey, you crazy kook. And it's his sense of humor, I guess. But it at this time, it just felt so disrespectful. It would be disrespectful anytime. But I think because we're unpacking these times where, I mean, we're all doing it, aren't we? We're all on board with like unpacking these slights that add up, these disrespects, so that we can fully turn on our power. And if I'm in my power and I can stand in my power, that makes me a better ally for other people who are standing up for to take back their power too, right? And I'm so inspired by the powerful speakers who I'm just so sparked by their ability to stand in their own power. And I want to learn how to do that more. I think that I have this association with humility and maybe timidity, or humility and inferiority, maybe, right? And that couldn't be further from the case. I think when you're humble, you think less about yourself and more about other people. And I think that's the point. Because this feeling like I really believe in this, I mean, what is there to believe? Why isn't it already equal? Like, that's the thing. What is there to believe? That's the thing. Like, yeah, why are we arguing about this? Why is this a controversial idea? I think some people just don't understand, maybe they don't understand history or the implications or what's happening now, what's actually happening, people's actual experiences, and how the language is changed, right? But it's still upholding the same, like, the same agenda in a way, right? So I think people just don't know. I'm hoping it's ignorance more than they know what's happening and they just don't care, right? I think people also believe they have more to lose than they actually do with equality. I think that's another lie that's spread. So it's interesting, but so this is a time of laying down our burdens and taking back our power. I don't know if I actually said this out loud, but I definitely said it in my head. So forgive me if this is repetitive, but I found it interesting that the victim carries the trauma and the entire burden of healing, right? and learning how to stand in their own power and find their voice, and despite, people around them silencing them or dismissing them of their experience. And I can relate to that just from my own experiences of attempting to find a shelter or trying to find protection from an adult. When I was going through really, really hard times, feeling victimized, I did try to go to people for help. And I was dismissed. I wasn't believed. And I feel like that taught me that you just hold it inside and you carry that, and then I had this thing where I also took on the inferiority complex, right, of that is sort of ancestral, and this legacy burden, right, that you might call it. So what happened then is I felt like I had to prove myself. I'm constantly proving myself instead of just living and being myself, right? I'm constantly proving myself, trying to go above and beyond. And I thought, if I'm more competent, maybe I'll have more confidence. So I'll go around gathering information, taking classes, taking trainings. Maybe if I'm just educated enough, right? Maybe if I just get better at an activity, if I just throw myself into singing, maybe if I maybe if I'm a better friend, if I'm a better listener, if I'm a better practitioner, if I'm really well read, that's the key, right? Then I'll have confidence. And that's not where confidence is. It's just not where it lies. I thought maybe, I'll get really thin and I'll feel beautiful and then I'll feel confident. No, because, then I was, and then envy sets in and people want to level you. It's just not, it's like a lose-lose until you stand in your power, right? It's a lose-lose until, like, you're never going to know enough. You're never going to be beautiful enough. You're never going to be worthy enough until you own your power. And part of that process for me was releasing trauma. So what happened with my cousin coming into town, repressed trauma was surfacing. And, that's part of this lunar eclipse, right? I was carrying the burden. I was carrying the guilt. I was carrying the shame. I was also carrying the inferiority. And I don't know what he's carrying, but he felt like he could send me that message. So I don't know. I was infuriated by that. I felt so disrespected, and he's always been that way. So I talked to my brother about it, and kind of, this was last night, I was talking to him about it and just going through everything I had been through around that, the inappropriateness and trying to manage it and not having any protection, like nobody protecting me or listening to me or hearing me. There were moments where my brother witnessed things happening and said, "That's weird." And I know that doesn't sound like much, but in those moments, because you feel crazy, right? Because it's like you're conditioned to think this is reality and you're suffering. So it really destroys your relationship with life. You don't love life anymore, right? It's just like, and if we don't have a good relationship with life, what are we going to do? What do you do? So looking at this, not taking accountability for what's not mine, that way I can own my accountability in other scenarios, and I'm not acting compulsively, right? To prove that I'm not inferior, right? To prove that my voice matters by just being so smart. Just trying to add value, right? Because that never lightens your load. It never eases the situation because it's about your relationship to life. I was also looking back at times where I explained probably moments of privilege, right? Moments where, that was, okay, that's what they mean by white privilege, where I got out of a traffic ticket, or they didn't want to search my backpack. I was, you know what I mean? So I didn't understand. I just thought, oh, okay, well, I dressed right that day, or God's looking out for me, right? How many things do we explain that are delusional, right? That's actually not what's happening, but we find these ways to, and that's what I think people are doing by saying, if you respect the police, right? But it's like, but you're speaking from the position of a white person in society, right? Like, people are having different experiences if you just learn to listen. I think some people just aren't willing to listen. I think that's probably part of the problem, because I have to believe it's ignorance. I do understand that I have a bias towards thinking people are more good than they might actually be. That's been used against me a lot in life. And Robert Greene talks about this. He has a bias that people are inherently worse than they probably are. He has this bias that people are inherently bad with human nature. He thinks that we're all very animalistic and that we have to evolve to become human. We change, we transform as we grow. And he has a book, I think it's 48 Laws of Power. That's one book I don't have. I have to get it. I was just watching an interview with him today, and it's the most requested book in prison, I think, and it's the most what's it called? Where it's not allowed, it's forbidden. You're not allowed to have that book. I can't remember the word, but it might come to me. But yeah, it's prohibited. I don't know. I don't think that's the right word, but you get the point. So why wouldn't they want that book? Why wouldn't they want people to understand power? That's something to consider. I do think this is about power dynamics and power struggle. That's what I'm saying. Who really holds the power? Who are we giving our power away? I think that's a theme this week. Because when we give that away, right? When we give power away willingly or unconsciously, it feels heavy. We give a part of ourselves away. It feels very heavy. It's a burden. Same goes if we take on something that's not ours. If we take on a part of somebody, right? If we take on someone's power or a part of them to caregive to, right? They say, take care of this for me. It's heavy. It's a heavy feeling. Part of this lunar eclipse, giving that back, taking it back. Okay. So give back those parts that you're carrying that are not your accountability. That's not yours to carry. Feels heavy. Same goes for the parts of you that you've given away. Shamans might call it soul retrieval, right? Taking back parts of yourself. Reclaiming. How can we embody and own more of our power, our personal power? And so that we're more equipped to leverage it, right? Particularly now, and particularly in the Black community, that's what's happening. We're how can we come to a greater state of equity, right? So I know I've been giving away my power. So let's see. I think I know a lot more showed up. I knew I would forget stuff, but what else is happening? I've been talking to my good friends, and this is another thing. Like, we're all speaking a different language right now. We're having to translate things for older generations, right? Translate the language. Privilege doesn't mean you have it easy, right? Privilege doesn't mean. So we're translating. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean yours doesn't, or that Black lives are more important. It's just, we're translating, right? And not everyone agrees on the language. So, well, maybe, in some cases, I think we're arguing semantics when we might actually agree. So it's just all these things in place to divide. I considered a few times this week, are putting out the small fires like that worth it when there's a bigger cause? Should I conserve my energy? Should I personally reach out? Should I just see there's a need for this information and just post it without confronting somebody? it's a very, not that they're listening anyway, right? So it's just very tricky. Talking to my brother, he watched 13th, and I believe, I think he said he did. But he's already so well informed. He's just such a good man. Like, we both had a lot to sort of heal and overcome, but I am always impressed by how he shows up for me. And yeah, so he ended up hosting, I think Seth Meyers interviewed a black woman about her experiences with the police, and her name escapes me. I hadn't heard her name before, but she was talking about her experiences with the police, and it was interesting to hear her experience and how she started forming her beliefs around it, you know. And I think that was important for people to hear. I reached out to him and said, thank you for sharing that. You know, he's just really smart in the way he words things. I could tell he was doing something, because he posted a status that was sort of abstract at first, because I had asked him like what he thought and if he would watch that, and I'd love his opinion. And so I thought maybe he was doing something strategically, because he's very smart, like I said. And it kind of pulled people in, right? It was about anecdotal evidence and information, and how we're listening to individual stories, and but it was disguised as just sort of I'm just a thought loop. He does that sometimes, right? He'll say, "Oh, I was just thinking about this," and how, you know, before modern technology, most people's evidence probably came from anecdotal evidence, and I was just thinking about this, and this is kind of what, you know. And I was sort of like, what? But I didn't realize what he was doing. It was like this way of engaging maybe more white men into the conversation without them knowing. It was, I have a lot to learn from him, because I'm so direct. I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm not disguising it. I'm trying to get better at that, because it's always clear how I feel. I try to tread lightly, but I'm such a Sagittarius. This is a learning curve for me. And so I was impressed by that. And then he posted the woman speaking about her experiences with the police, and and he was like, I realize this is anecdotal information, but I think it's worth hearing people out about their stories. And so I actually messaged him about thanking him for sharing that, and particularly because it was a woman, and that meant a lot to me, because I feel like I've been silenced, and there's lots of parts of me that feel unheard, right? That's part of the work I do now, is teaching other people how to listen to these parts, to respect these parts, and to work with them, and to understand them. And I'm doing that for myself too, which is interesting, because I've been talking to, sorry, this is all over the place. So I shared my experiences with my brother about all these things I had gone through, and some of them he was there and he called it out, right? And he was like, that's really weird. Why is this happening? Right? So, and I told him that helped me feel not crazy. That small, he didn't have to say, stop doing this, why, and protect me. He could just point out, that's weird. And it helped me, because I felt crazy, right? I felt like I was crazy, because I kept getting the message that I was misinterpreting something, or I started turning on myself, right? And thinking, maybe I'm the one with the perverted thoughts. I didn't know, like I was confused. So that was really helpful for me. that small allyship, right? That's all it took for me to feel like someone else sees this, someone else thinks it's weird too. Thank God, right? Because I was just so in my head about it. I made an enemy of my body. So, and I told him that, and he didn't even remember that memory. So, that was powerful. That I was able to share all that stuff with him because he grew up in the same environment as me. He knows all these people, right? And how it affected me in my life. And I felt like I was able to unload it. It was an unburdening. I was able to express it to somebody who I kept checking in, like, I'm not burdening you with this, am I? He's like, no, I'm really good at not taking things on. So that was really powerful. And then I woke up, I cried all out. I'm still a little emotional. There's some under the surface, but I feel like a lot of it was unburdened. I keep checking the time because the video will cut out at a certain point, and I don't want to make this too long. And so, yeah, there's that. And I've been listening to lectures, reading articles, trying to understand the policies that people are trying to put into place, just understanding information that I didn't understand how important it was to pay attention to this. I didn't get it. I'm glad there's so many of us in the conversation now. It's interesting that we've been training the muscle of self-leadership for so long. It's like many of us have voices that want to be heard. And so I'm really glad that I read that article for white people, right? Someone that was prepared for this. They knew it was coming. They were like, white people, you want to be a better ally? Here are some steps you can take. Don't burden your black friends, right? You can ask questions, but seek information first. It's the information age. I'm so glad I found that, because that's what made me double, check in with myself about reaching out and burdening my black friends with this. So, about what can I do? So there's that, and then amplifying black voices and listening, right? Listening. So, taking back our personal power, so that we can take a stand effectively, right? And just arming ourselves with information and a better understanding of what's actually happening. I think breaking down our own biases, whatever you can do, if you're growing, if you're changing, it's going to be messy. It's not a perfect process. I think we're doing it right. The more we can come together in unity, I think that's what we need to do. Redistributing accountability, right? The heaviness of the accountability and the burdens. My spiritual sister, it's funny, we have to take on new terms because language is shifting. I was telling her that too. It's like we have a whole new language and we're translating our lives, right? Teaching older generations the new language, but also, the word friend has a whole different meaning. People are saying, using the word friend, and it's so diluted, isn't it? So I had to start saying like my chosen family or my spiritual sister or people I have emotional intimacy with or whatever it is, because friend doesn't have a lot of meaning anymore, does it? That kind of means I knew them, right? Or I know them, I know of them. People were saying, my friend said. So language is shifting and changing and evolving. And that's part of part of the issue is this translation. Not everyone understands the language. And yeah. So and not everyone is, I guess, on board with the change. So like I said, I'm not sure what that side is about, but I'm hoping it's more ignorance than hatred. I don't know. There's so much information out there, right? There's amazing speakers, amazing TED Talks. So just like learning, it's a learning time of learning and listening, and while still doing my work. That's the other thing about humility. It's like, I think there's an association with humility and inferiority, and I have to break that association because that's not helping. Standing in my own power, maintaining my boundaries. I've gotten better. I was also thinking about equity in relationships and the power struggles and dynamics there, and how I'm hoping that will change too. I'm hoping that will shift. You hear a lot of relationship experts out there talking about how to get men to chase, or men, this is how you pursue a woman. And I sort of feel like I don't want to be chased, right? Do women want to be chased? That's terrifying to me. Like, you don't really want you to chase. Now, I get that that's just kind of a metaphor, but could you just be present? Could we just be humans with one another and have a conversation? I'm not interested in being chased. I'm so focused on my purpose that, because I look at relationships that have been modeled for me, and people give their power away so much. There's a difference between being conditioned to willingly give it away, which I think is happening, but also it just overtly being taken away, clearly, in broad daylight, right? And I think that's why this feels so urgent. Once you're awake to that, I didn't understand that. So how can we sit back and let that continue? So anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. Anyway, okay, so my spiritual sister, this is the last thing. My spiritual sister, we've been messaging back and forth, creating a safe space to work out and unpack things that are coming up, and sharing our process with one another. We want to collaborate on possibly supporting other people in releasing trauma. We've both done a lot of work with trauma. So we're going to collaborate on something. We're going to talk about that. She reached out to me because I've been going through a lot, grappling with everything, and a lot has been coming up to be looked at, deconstructed, released. Where have I been diminishing myself, right? Being respectful doesn't mean I allow you to treat me like a doormat, right? Or being respectful, right? Is that what I said? Being respectful doesn't mean you can treat me like a doormat and I have no boundaries. It's a mutual thing. So I'm learning that learning curve too, because usually I'll avoid. I have been avoidant, avoided confrontation in the past. And she reminds me of the things I've confronted and faced. And she reminded me in particular that I was being when I worked at a metaphysical store, bookstore called East West Living in the Union Square area of Manhattan. It's no longer there, but there was someone putting spells on me. I know that sounds crazy, but he was doing a lot of magic on me, and I don't think it was a love spell. I don't think he was looking for love. Let's just say that. And it was terrorizing like my dreams and things like that. And there would be moments where in my mind's eye, I would just see him like right here. And it was terrorizing me. Like it was this spiritual kind of harassment. It's very bizarre. And I didn't understand energy protection or anything at the time. So I was also very weakened by all the hooks and things that would penetrate me. And that would feel very heavy to me. So I was so afraid of this person. I was afraid of anyone that practiced magic, or I felt new things that I didn't know. So I was just very afraid. I was new to everything. I didn't know if, he could follow me home or what he was capable of. So, but he was like coming into my dreams and stuff. And she reminded me of one dream where I was being chased, and it was terrifying. Like someone broke into my house, and I was running away from them, and I ran outside and I was running, and eventually I stopped running and I turned around and faced them and started running towards them. And I don't remember that part. I never remembered that part. She held that piece for me, which is interesting, right? Because that's a positive way that someone's holding something that's not theirs, right? So she gave that back to me. She gave me back my power, and she was that piece of it anyway in that story that I had shared with her. And she said, "I'll never forget that. You said you turned around and you started running towards them, and they disappeared, or I think they disappeared, or they dissolved, or they ran away from me, something. I wouldn't blame them." But she said, you have to, because I was describing this person that's in town who has been a bully and showed predatory behaviors, things like that. So I was saying, I'm even afraid to come out of my apartment because we all grew up here. I feel like really exposed. It's very scary. I've had to face a lot of these feelings moving back here. But as the healing process initiated, she said, "Isn't that interesting that while you're releasing all this and healing, he comes back into town?" It was like, yeah, that is true. So much work of unburdening this week, releasing, unpacking, incidents of where power was taken away, and taking it back, right? So I think many of us are going through this, taking back our personal power and thinking about power and power dynamics and the power of distributing resources and things like that. So that's definitely been the theme, and redistributing accountability. And using that leverage, right? So she reminded me that I needed to remember that I was a warrior, that I was powerful, that I've been confronted in the past, and I didn't run away. I faced it head on. And it's interesting because if I was working with a client, that's exactly what I would tell them to do. So it's a time of testing our tools, our theories, and, standing together in unity, taking back what we are accountable for, and And right, because boundaries are a huge part of trust. And so that includes self-trust, doesn't it? It also occurred to me how being silent in any way, right? Particularly if it's one thing to listen, it's another thing to be terrified and bullied into silence. And that can feel like self-betrayal. I think we're unpacking a lot of that too. So a lot of work, and we're still in process, right? We all have our own personal individual journeys here, but and it's breaking down these constructs we have of other, isn't it? Unpacking this trauma so we can stand in our power. I was listening to a woman talking about some people have a superiority complex, some people have an inferiority complex. But what if we took the approach of the interior and how many of us have this really solid sense of self when we're children, and when we start to become self-conscious, we start being very aware of our limitations. And that's part of the whole humility is not about diminishing yourself, right? Or feeling inferior. Humility is about thinking less, not about thinking less of yourself, but about thinking less about yourself. So, and that's one example of how language can be so powerful, right? So we're looking at that too. So, I'd love to know what your experience of the 10 of Wands week was. Were you unpacking some of this burden? Were you laying down your wands? Giving back some of the things you're carrying that aren't yours to carry. So they are just this heavy burden. You can't use that energy. So laying down the burdens and owning your power so that we can make change, the necessary changes, right? So let's share with me what you went through during the 10 of Wands week. Let's get into the Page of Wands. So the Page of Wands, according to Robert M. Place, in keeping with Levi's idea that the royal cards represent a family with the first representing the youngest child, this card was named the Page in English. A page is a young noble who was put in the service of a lady. When he reached his teens, he was apprenticed to a knight, and his title changed to squire. The figures on the cards are actually too old to be pages. They are squires or possibly knaves, a title often used on cards, who are servants, though not of noble blood, noble birth. On later cards, the title Jack was also used for knave. In the pictorial key to the tarot, Waite acknowledges the fact that the page should correctly be labeled a squire, or as he writes, an esquire, presumably in the service of a knight. In the Golden Dawn's teachings on the tarot, the pages are called princesses, and they are said to represent reception and transmission. Smith's page is a richly clothed man walking into a desert landscape, clutching his living wand as if transferring his wand to a new, uncultivated area. This image is influenced by the Solabusca knave of staffs, or batons. The page is dressed in red and yellow to represent fire, and his tunic has a beautiful design made of salamanders, curving to bite their tails like an Ouroboros. And Ouroboros is the image of a snake biting its own tail, right? These are salamanders. The salamander is the elemental spirit of fire. This card represents enterprise. Wade feels that the page is making a proclamation, though his hand is not extended and his mouth is closed. So that's Robert M. Place's description and meaning of the Page of Wands. So the page wants to move forward. Communication is coming, an offer of passion, inspiration and desire of action. Young and newly inspired, immature, not ready to bring passion forward. Action not thought out, bluntness can be indicated. And in the book that comes with the tarot cards, in a scene similar to the former, meaning the Ten of Wands, a young man stands in the act of proclamation. He is unknown, but faithful, and his tidings are strange. Dark young man, faithful, a lover, an envoy, a postman. Beside a man, he will bear favorable testimony concerning him. So if this card shows up in a spread beside a man, I guess, he will bear favorable testimony concerning him. He is a dangerous rival if followed by the Page of Cups. He has the chief qualities of his suit. Creativity, passion, right? Fire, motivation. So the Alice B. Grist's intuitive definition for the Page or Princess of Wands, this card represents a whole host of new opportunities. You are being asked to get in contact with your deepest inner child. Perhaps you left her behind a long time ago, buried her under adult life. Well, she is back. And she wants to play. She has creative ideas and inspiration to bring to your table. She is asking you to see the world differently, from a younger perspective. She wants to shake things up and get zany. The zanier, the better. Consider what you left behind in childhood. Who were you? What did you love? What made you happy? Find that part of yourself once more and invite her out to play. Make her a dish of her fave grub and dig in. She never really left you. She has been waiting. Open the door to all the fun and wisdom she has to offer. So interesting, because that's what my spiritual sister was saying. Like, I can see that you're a warrior. I can see your power. Maybe the little one inside needs to hear that too, which is interesting. And I always like to share the Biddy Tarot. So the Page of Wands, inspiration, ideas, discovery, limitless potential, free spirit. The Page of Wands shows a young man holding a long staff in both hands as he looks inquisitively at the green leaves sprouting from the top. His tunic is emblazoned with salamanders, a mythical creature associated with fire and transformation. The page stands still with his staff firmly planted on the ground, suggesting that while he is inspired by the potential growth represented by the sprouting staff, he has not yet taken action on this inspiration. In the background, the landscape is barren and mountainous, implying that this page has the gift of being able to find growth and potential in the most unlikely places. He is so energized by his ideas that he can make anything happen and isn't limited by his circumstances. Within the Page of Wands, you are inclined to give anything and everything a go. You embrace the opportunity to start out on a new journey or project and see where it takes you. You do not necessarily have a solid plan in place, nor do you really know where you are headed, but you are excited about the possibilities. You have a gift for dreaming up new creative ideas, unfettered by the burdens of everyday life. Nothing will get in the way of your dreams. And while the appearance of the Page of Wands indicates that you are experiencing creative restlessness, notice that the page is standing still and his staff is firmly planted on the ground. He is not going anywhere just yet. You still need to take your creative spark and ground it down into reality so that it is ready to be implemented in the physical realm. You may need to map out your strategy, or you may need to test your ideas or create a few experiments before committing. It could be helpful to run your thoughts through a filter so that you only act on those most aligned with your broader goals. The Page of Wands can appear when a spiritual path or journey may be calling you. You have a curious mind and are intrigued to see where this call might lead you. While you are very much the novice when it comes to the spiritual endeavor, you're open to the experience and keen to discover new levels of consciousness. You may benefit from working with a wise mentor, someone who has walked your path before and can now lead you forward. Here's hoping. That would be nice. Because I think I was saying that earlier, how self-leadership, I don't know if this made it to this video, but I was saying how, there's been so much emphasis on self-leadership that maybe part of maybe our ability to work within and understand group dynamics has atrophied. So it's a little clunky right now, but we're getting there, right? Okay. Making progress. Progress over perfection. It's going to be messy. All right. Well, let's play the singing bowl, integrating the transformation and transmutation and experiences, continuing the momentum there that came in with the 10 of Wands week, and sending out intentions for the Page of Wands and synchronicities there to come into our experience. Good. Coming back to the room. So, so much growth, right? Progress. I had seen a list of all the things that have taken place. Since George Floyd's murder, right? All the things that have taken place. So, the positive change, right? Progress, right? I will, let me know if your experiences. I'd love to know in the comments. I'm a little scattered, sorry. Thanks for liking the video, subscribing to the channel. If you want a personal reading or session, or to donate to the channel, that'll all be in the description of this video. I continue to add resources, right, for being a better ally, things like that. And I wish you a powerful week, right? In touch with your own personal power. I will see you in the next one. Bye, Empath.